Lavinia sounds like such a lovely name. A touch of European influence with the grace of Southern charm mixed in. But this story has nothing to do with grace or charm. On the contrary, deceit and murder. Before there was Jack the Ripper and the other hated serial killers, there was John and Lavinia Fisher. Lavinia was born in 1793 and grew up to marry a man named John Fisher. The pair seemed like honest, hard-working entrepreneurs, opening a hotel called the 6 Mile Wayfarer House, which they managed in the early 1800s. Named for the distance north of Charleston, the 6 Mile Wayfarer House was a pleasant place for travelers to rest, until they started going missing. And though authorities investigated all possible leads, there was no firm evidence that concluded the missing people had any connection to the Fisher duo. The Fishers were also well liked in Charleston and were very popular. How could anyone suspect them of such a dastardly deed? But karma has a way of catching up with you, and for John and Lavinia Fisher, time was running out. Legend tells of the story of John Peoples. A man traveling from Georgia to Charleston and seeking rest and restoration stopped at the 6 Mile Wayfarer House to recharge. Mr. Peoples was disappointed to hear that the end was booked solid, but dear sweet Lavinia would cook him something to eat anyhow, just to show how kind she was. It struck Mr. Peebles as being a bit odd. Lavinia began showing extreme interest in his employment, and he began receiving strange glances from her husband from across the table. And then mysteriously, a room opened up. As they chatted, Lavinia got up from the table and poured him a cup of tea. Now, Mr. Peoples was not a tea drinker, and instead of insulting his sweet host, he quickly poured it out while she was in the other room. Weary from travel, Mr. Peebles soon retired to his room. But something wasn't quite right. Even though Lavinia was very attractive and very kind, he got the feeling and had some suspicions that this seemingly kind couple was meant to do him harm. Instead of lying down in the bed to rest, Mr. Peoples stayed awake, eyes blinking and head bobbing as he tried to keep sleep at bay. But it was no use, and he drifted off sitting upright and not in the bed. Suddenly he was awakened by a loud noise. The bed was gone and had disappeared into a deep hole beneath the flooring. Mr. Peoples jumped to his feet, opened the window, mounted his horse, and rode the 6 miles back to Charleston, where he told authorities of the incident. This was just the break the authorities needed, a live witness to testify and a reason to search the inn. John and Lavinia were arrested, and the mountain of evidence started piling up. On trial, the two could not convince the jury of their innocence, and they were sentenced to hang. Following due process, they were given time to appeal the decision, at which time they tried to escape and failed. Ultimately, because of the evidence and their actions, their appeal was rejected and their execution was set for February 18, 1820. The gallows waited for John and Lavinia Fisher. John found religion and asked the crowd to accept his innocence based on the fact that he had found God. Lavinia did not go so gracefully.
And the legend goes that when she appeared on the gallows, she was wearing a white wedding dress. Some people say it was because she was determined to become Satan's bride.
Oh my gosh.
But others say that it was because of a law in South Carolina. Back then, and she was hanged on February 18th, 1820. Back then, there was a statute in South Carolina dating back to colonial times, which said that the state of South Carolina did not hang married women. And when Lavinia was first sentenced, along with her husband, to be hanged, she stood up in open court and defiantly looked at the judge and said, "Your Honor, you can't hang me. I'm a married woman."
Oh.
And the judge calmly looked over and said, "Mrs. Fisher, I've thought this through. All I have to do is hang your husband first." And as she watches her husband being pulled dead from the gallows and laid down next to it, they drag her up kicking and screaming. And as she stands on the gallows wearing a white wedding dress, which she convinced her jailers to let her wear before leaving, she stands there looking at the crowd, expecting one of the men to be moved by her legendary beauty and offer to marry her on the spot and save her under that same law. Well, it didn't happen.
Oh.
And when she realized she was about to die, she looked at this crowd and screamed her last words, "If you have a message for the devil, give it to me now. I will see that he gets it."
Oh my gosh.
And then rather than wait to be dropped by the executioner, she beat him to the gun. She jumps off the gallows, flies out over this very, very angry crowd, and swings for, some say, as much as 45 minutes before she drew her last breath.